Hello, this is the Magnate. You're welcome to this week's edition of the program. Today, our focus will be on the educational sector. Yes, we are going to be talking learning, education. How have we fared in Nigeria? And we have who should know. We have a university done, a professor who sits at tops, a great citadel of learning in Nigeria, one of the institutions in Nigeria that is becoming an envy of other universities. Let's bring you the citation of our Magnate for the week. When we come back, you bet it will be an interactive session as usual. We'll be back shortly.
Professor Ibraheem Gbajabiamila was born in Lagos State over 6 decades ago. He received his primary and secondary education in London. He proceeded to the University of London in 1976, where he obtained his first degree in microbiology. He remained at the university as a research student until he obtained his PhD in virology in 1984. He was at the university as a research fellow before obtaining his first appointment within the University of London, where he worked for over 20 years, rising to the rank of head of extramural science. He was later headhunted to the role of associate director in another London university, where he had academic responsibility for academic excellence. Gbajabiamila was visiting professor and later appointed deputy vice-chancellor and professor of virology at Crescent University, Abeokuta, in 2010-2011. Professor Gbajabiamila has served on a member of a number of international community organizations. His tenure as Vice-Chancellor of Crescent University since November 2014 has witnessed numerous achievements. Professor Gbajabiamila is a lover of teaching profession, which he deliberately inherited from his father and by extension his grandfather. The popular Ansaruddin Society of Nigeria, which gave birth to Ansaruddin primary schools, colleges and hospitals, started in his family compound on Lagos Island in the 1920s with his grandfather and other friends as foundation members. The classic and erudite Professor Gbajabiamila belongs to several professional associations including Member Institute of Learning and Teaching, UK, Member Forensic Science Society, Member Institute of Biology, a Chartered Biologist, Fellow Linen Society. In recognition of his numerous contributions to knowledge, human capital development, and community service, our esteemed Professor Gbajabiamila has received academic, professional, and community awards too numerous to mention. Professor Gbajabiamila is a prolific speaker, humble personage, articulate scholar, fluid presenter, and academic manager of human and material resources.
Welcome back. It's still the Magnate, and it's a great pleasure to be in the office of the Vice-Chancellor of Crescent University in Abeokuta. He is Professor Ibraheem Gbajabiamila. You're welcome to the Magnate, sir.
Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you for having us, sir.
Thank you.
Education. Why should we talk about education in Nigeria? How have we fared comparatively to the global space, sir?
Yes. Education is very, very important for transmission of knowledge, and any important or developing nation and society, education is key to that development. So I think we should always talk about education. The issue as to comparing how we fare in the global space is a very convoluted and difficult question, because unfortunately we have not been faring very well. We had a history of excellence before independence and immediately after independence, and unfortunately we have been sliding down since then. But nonetheless, we have to look at the indices in terms of why we have failed so far. And you don't have to look very far. It's due to our inability to commit our resources to education sector. The best way to illustrate our failings is the COVID pandemic. When the COVID pandemic came, we were only have four functioning laboratories, and we had to depend on handouts, donations of kits. And people who are older remember that there used to be a manufacturing vaccine facility in Yaba. So for a population of 200 million, to only have 4 functioning laboratories is shameful. But just to say that over the last 2 years, we have increased our facilities to over 100. We have spent more on the health service, for example, more than in the last 2 years, more than the previous 50 years. So the failings are there for us, and we have to look at why we have failed and hopefully to try and reposition ourselves, because it has affected our youths. So I think those are the issues.
Okay. Talking about the youth, do you think that Nigerians generally are intelligent, or they are very difficult to train or to educate?
No, not so. I think I will refute that profusely. Nigerians are not difficult. I have 30 years experience of teaching in the University of London, and most of the Nigerian students that came to do their masters were exceedingly brilliant and were able to fit in, having been taught in the universities here. And of course the records itself shows that if you look at where we were at independence, some people may not be aware that in 1958 and in the early 60s, before UI was established, all those people went to UI, took University of London degrees. So what it meant is that across the Commonwealth, if you were in New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, Nigeria, Ghana, you all sat exactly the same exams. And it was always a wonder that some of the Nigerian students performed very well in the generation of His Excellency Principal Ajibola, Wole Soyinka, all those other people. So I would refute a claim that Nigerians are difficult to train. That's not the case.
Okay.
If you look at all the manpower that we have lost in different parts of the world today, Nigerians are excelling. There are more Nigerian neurosurgeons in America than there are in the whole of Nigeria. If you go to the website and Google it, you will see where they all qualify from: Unilag, UI, Nsukka, ABU. They are of benefit to the American economy and not to the Nigerian economy. Okay. So I think we have enough facts to buttress that point. So I would definitely refute that the youths are difficult. If they are given the opportunity, they would excel. The best way for me to illustrate that is the WAEC result. WAEC results is what we have comparative data for the last 40 years. And the idea of the WAEC results is that we as a nation have dominated it for the first 30 years in terms of performance of the students. It is either King's College, PBS, all the Nigerian secondary schools dominated the WAEC results. Wow. But unfortunately, over the last 10 years, it has been a reversal of fortune. Children are not even in the top 100. It's mainly Ghanaian schools. Now you ask why? Why is that the case? How did we get to a stage where we dominated an event and suddenly we have been in the reversal of fortune? But because of modern education, modern WAEC, especially in science, which is my field, you need to have functioning laboratories. You need to have running water. You need to have light. Those 3 important elements are in the Ghanaian secondary school education. So our children are taking the same exams with less facilities. So of course the performance is poor.
Interesting.
And unfortunately we have not been able to reverse that issue. UNESCO says we should spend 25% of GDP on education. Unfortunately we were spending 9%.
Wow.
And the last last month is only 5%.
Wow.
So you have to ask yourself,
miracle cannot happen.
Yes, how can 5% and somebody spending 25% of GDP, how can they be in the same race? So that I think is the best way you will illustrate that if you give our youths the opportunity and chance, spend the right money, they will excel. There's no doubt about that.
Interesting. You alluded to the fact that a lot of people, even some of us that also went to school way back, we used to have a lot of foreigners coming to our universities to train.
Absolutely.
But it does seem now that the reverse is the case. Is it the same as what you have just enumerated?
Absolutely, absolutely. Those of you who are old enough will remember that almost all the African students came to Nigerian universities. And I remember that there was a time that the Nigerian government sponsored students from South Africa, Namibia, Rhodesia. When I was in University of London, there were South African students sponsored by Nigerian government into University of London. So the universities that we had here were the dominant of both the Ghanaian and other West African countries. That is clearly what was before, but it has reversed to the situation that as of today, there are 78,000 Nigerian students in Ghana alone.
Wow.
78,000, paying in dollars. Now, you have to ask that the best developer of Ghana's higher education are Nigerians. Nigerian parents have volunteered that since the government is unable to provide the quality education or the here, they have then taken their money to Ghana. And the point I want to make here is that in Ghana alone, the 78,000 paying in dollars, when you add it all up, it's more than the federal budget on education. If you want me to repeat that, that in one country alone, Ghana,
Ghana is not even as much as Nigeria.
Exactly, ma'am. So that the issue of what they are spending in Malaysia, Singapore, USA, is a capital flight. Yes, it's a capital flight by our parents and also a brain drain. The irony is that most of the people manning the Ghanaian higher education system are Nigerians. So that, I think, is a reflection of our current situation.
Okay. I'm also curious because you speak with passion about education. Is it because your roots, you are from education background, I mean, taking it back to your ancestors, your parents, and all that? Like you said, you have taught in London, and then back here, we see you year after year, the passion with which you nurture these children from your school. You know.
Yes, I think it's very, very difficult from our family, from growing up. You know, my father, great-grandfather, and once before him were teachers. And when I read at some of the issues they tackled, essentially all the things I've been saying about out-of-school children, they were saying it in 1922. They went to meet the colonial masters, you know, a group of parents in Lagos, led by my great-grandfather. They went to meet the parents and said, our children are roaming the streets, and that they are not given the opportunity to go to school. And more importantly, there was a condition that if they wanted to attend certain schools, they had to change their religion. So the colonial masters replied them that whatever rules are established by the people who own the school, you have to follow. So it is when those parents now came back and said, well, it is clear to us, if they say they don't want us, there's a challenge, that we have to do something about it. And that's why they formed the Ansaruddin movement, you know, in our family compound. So our students and children and those before them were taught that education is the key. And my own father and his cohorts were teachers, told me going around to open the Ansaruddin schools in different parts of the country. So that is their passion. But whatever it is that they have said, it's unfortunate that we are still saying the same thing 100 years later. Children out of school, 20% of children out of school in the whole world are in Nigeria, 13 million children.
Okay. You know, this is very interesting, which is, you know, leading to the next point of conversation. Probably the realization that government really can't do it all.
Absolutely.
That's why you just even cited an example, I mean, almost a centenary back, how the private sector, you know, how do you think the inclusion of private sector in education has complemented provision of education to the enlarged populace of Nigeria?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. I think all over the world, government cannot do it alone. I mean, if you take example from Lagos, in Lagos there are 16,000 private secondary schools, 16,000, overwhelming.
You took your time to do all that statistics.
So the government itself cannot cope. They cannot provide the quality, they cannot provide the depth. So it is those parents and those entrepreneurs and those philanthropists that chose to put their money in education that has allowed to complement the growth of education in those countries. Just give you an example of the USA. For example, Stanford. Stanford was a farm, and the owner of the farm said he was going to retire. Instead of giving the farm to the children, he said he wanted to give it to the state for educational purpose. And the attitude of the American government was that, well, if they are going to be of benefit to American citizens, they took over the farm and started the university Stanford University today is one of the world's top education institutions, private. Not also Harvard. You will look at the history. So if you look all over the world, you will see that the private sector intervention as what has lifted those countries. So we are not any different.
Okay.
The only difference is our attitude to those private entrepreneurs.
Okay, I want now situate it to Nigerian sector.
Yes.
I mean, we know, and we are always confronted, even with the public, the challenges in the public sector. As much as we don't want to situate it, we want to make this conversation generic.
Yes.
A lot more people now warm up. Those who can afford it now warm up to even the private universities because of the incessant industrial action.
Yes.
How do you think this has contributed to the quality of our graduates in the country?
Yes, I think you have to appreciate how we got to where we are. We have a situation where at that time, 16, 17 years ago, the number of children, because of our increasing population, the number of total carrying capacity of the system we had about 300,000 capacity, and over 1 million were sitting jam. So there's clearly not enough space for them. And the government decided at that time that they would to license private universities to complement the shortfall. And increasingly, the shortfall has got to the stage where in 2022, we have 111 private universities in Nigeria and 47 public. So the private sector, if it's not for the private sector, I don't know where our children would have been.
A lot of out-of-school children.
Exactly, complementing and supporting ourselves. So I believe that we will have to commend people like His Excellency Prince Bola Ajibola and others that have put their money into those education to actually solve the problem. But of course, the problem is bigger. We cannot solve all the problem alone. That is why there is a need for the public sector and the government. And you have to ask, in light of your first question, why is education important? For national development. So education and health. And these things are not new. This was what was said in the old Western region, where Chief Obafemi Awolowo put in extra taxes. Yes, extra taxes. And parents agreed. And a lot of our distinguished professors today got those Awolowo scholarships. Those scholarships are no longer available.
Yes, a lot of beneficiaries.
Yes,
you know.
so, and it didn't matter what your background was. You took the exam, and if you were successful, you would get those scholarships. So that's why I always reflect to where we were, that we are living a system that is worse than our parents left for us. And that is a shame, because we're a top 10 oil producer.
Okay, you know, when you are talking of JAM, you said that earlier, one would now wonder, a lot of people, naysayers will say, competitive-wise, that it's those students or children who couldn't pass JAM to go into federal schools or the government-owned schools that are now being accommodated. Once you have your money, you can now come to the private school. How do you clarify this?
No, that's not true. I think the issue is parents being fed up with not being sure of when you will start a course and when you will graduate. So the idea that it's because they can't get into federal, that is very false. The issue, the same reason why 78,000 are in Ghana, is not because they can't get into Nigerian school, is because they know that if they do a 4-year course in Ghana, it will be 4 years. And the same, so those are the reasons why those parents are making those choices. But we as a nation have failed our children in not being able to meet that global standard, and also putting enough money into the education to ensure that the quality is maintained. The quality that we had at independence, that the University College Ibadan was one of the top 10 hospitals in the Commonwealth. You can go and Google it. So that was the standard. So you have to ask yourself, why were we top 10 in the Commonwealth in 1958 or whatever, and now in 2022 we are not even in the top 1,000. So if you don't spend the money, then you will continually slide down. That is unfortunate.
This is the Magnate. We're still chatting with Professor Ibraheem Gbajabiamila, the Vice Chancellor of Crescent University. Let's go for a short break. When we come back, we'll round up the conversation.
The formal conferment of awards commenced with the honorary doctorate degrees on prominent Nigerians. The brief ceremony was preceded with a brief citation of each of the awardees.
Honorable High Chief Bode Mustafa, the OC of Egbaland, has had a stellar career in business and politics to serve Egbaland, Ogun State, and the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
This award of BSc of Crescent University, Abeokuta, in politics and international relations.
I'm just overwhelmed because to be done this kind of honor where I come from, it's to me just the grace of God. God has been very good to me.
Chief Muritala Adebaya Konde was born to the illustrious family of Chief Honorable Agbola Sanusi Akonde of the Adelakunbaji family in Isale-Jebu, Ibadan. He had his primary education between 1947 and 1959 at the Olubadan Native Authority School, Ibadan.
You continue thanking God that one is still alive. One is still recognized somewhere.
Haji Astam Ramat Mosun Bello Olushoga, popularly known as Auntie Mo, is the lead consultant and chief executive officer of the Knowledge and Resource Center Limited.
It is only Allah that bestows honor on one. And, I'm just sort of I am the fruit of God's mercy. I am Tamramant.
What is the uniqueness of this edition?
The only 3 awardees. Any university doing more than that is actually against the Kefi Awards. It's a very, very competitive process. We start off with about 20, and sometimes, there is a committee that weeds them out. And essentially to come at the final 3, they are the best of the very best.
You're welcome back. It's still the Magnates, and we're still chatting with Professor Ibraheem Gbajabiamila, the Vice Chancellor of Crescent University. Before now, we saw that the female education was really not, taken seriously. But for a while now, we see that top students of your own Great Citadel of Learning, females are always topping. Is there a preference for that? What's your take on this?
Yes, there isn't a preference. It's an issue of performance. I think when the university started, the intake was 70% male and 30% female. And I remember the proprietor, His Excellency Principal Ajibola, said he looked forward to the day where the number of boys and girls would equal in terms of his love of girl-child education. But the last session, there has been a turnaround. Our intake was 70% female and 30% male. So when I informed him, he said so soon, because he was only praying for 50-50, and it had gone the other way. But I think what we have here is a situation where the performance of the female students has been exemplary over the last 16 years. Most of the best graduating students, first class, because the female students are very focused and they have been able to achieve. So when they are here, there's no distraction. Okay. And I think that is the secret of their success.
Okay, finally, earlier on you talked about brain drain.
Yes.
Would you really call it brain drain or brain gain? Because some of the people that go, sometimes they come back to also impact knowledge.
Well, not enough are coming back. The situation is that we're supposed to have one doctor or one nurse to 6,000 of the population. We don't have 1 to 60,000. So we, as a developing country, can ill afford to lose our doctors, neurosurgeons, nurses, health professionals to developing countries. In fact, UNESCO made an appeal in 2016 that the developed countries should not go and be taking professionals from those developing countries where they are needed most. So it is definitely a brain drain for us because we are losing qualified professionals trained and financed by the Nigerian taxpayer. The people in all our big universities, UI, IFE, and other places, are financed by the taxpayers of Nigeria, but the beneficiaries are those countries and not the Nigerian taxpayers. So
what's your counsel for others, sir? Thank you, sir. What's your counsel for, the youth, parents, the government, to ensure that education remains the top notch in Nigeria?
Well, if we appreciate and understand our problem, then we have to look for solutions. The solutions are clear. We have to spend more on education, as have been done with Ghana with 25%. So if we are able to spend the recommendations, and I'm sure I have confidence in our youth that they would excel. There are people excelling even without government help. When you look at the athlete, Amuson and other people, it's because of individual talent. So that, I think, is what is the most important thing for us. So
thank you very much.
That is my take.
Yes, that has been our program today, The Magnates, mentoring on television and lending a voice to the growth of business. We focused on the educational sector today. And we had with us Professor Ibraheem Gbajabiamila, the Vice Chancellor of Crescent University. Remember, you can always watch this program again on our YouTube channel. And then, of course, also follow us on our various social media handles. Make it a date with us same time next week when we shall be focusing on another sector, all in a bid to mentor you on television. Until then, bye for now.